Hey YouTubers, this is a rare interview with Robert Kiyosaki. I found this audio in some boxes in storage on a cassette tape. You remember that, you guys, cassette tapes? But anyways, this audio is about 40 minutes long, and the audio is kind of rough, so bear with it, guys. It was taped on a Radio Shack player over the radio, and it's kind of rough, so bear with it. The interviewer is Cynthia Oti. Cynthia Oti used to do a radio show in San Francisco on Hot Talk 560 AM called Financial Fitness, and she came across this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and wanted to get Robert on to do an interview and talk about his book and his ideas and stuff like that. So this interview was in October 12th, 1999. Well, 3.5 months later, Cynthia Oti passed away in a plane crash coming back from Mexico. She was due back on the air at 7 p.m., but never made it. She was on Alaska Flight 261, and unfortunately, everybody passed away on that plane. Cynthia Oti was a successful stockbroker for First Union Securities in San Francisco. I just like to dedicate this piece of audio to her, and also Robert for opening my eyes to assets, liabilities, and real estate. So again, guys, bear with the audio. It's about 40 minutes long, and it's kind of rough, so just bear with it. Hopefully you can hear it okay. Enjoy.
Hot 560 KSFO.
Good evening, Cynthia Oti with you on KSFO. The phone number is 808-5600, 808-5600, and I believe calling from his car is my favorite new author, Robert Kiyosaki. Robert, are you there?
Cynthia, how are you?
Hello, so you're on your way home, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm still messed up. I can't believe it.
That's all right. I know all these press tours and things. Everyone wants your time. Robert Kiyosaki is the author of a fabulous book you all just have to read if you haven't already, called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, a lot of people listening to this program, I think because of my insistence, have bought your book. For those who have not, on page 74 of the book, you say, just remember this simple observation, and this really gets to the crux of your thesis. The rich buy assets, the poor only have expenses. The middle class buy liabilities they think are assets. Could you just explain that? Now we're going to open it up to questions.
Oh, she asked me a simpler question. It goes, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, first of all, is a true story for those that haven't read it. My real dad was a PhD in education. In fact, he went to Stanford for a little while, and an academic genius. But he was my poor dad very simply because he was a high-paid government official, and no matter how much money he made, he was always broke. And my rich dad was my best friend's father, who ultimately became one of the richest men in the state of Hawaii. So the book is really about what my rich dad taught me, and it's positioned against what my middle-class dad taught me. But the big thing that's saying there is it goes down to my poor dad, the school teacher, was not financially literate. He was very word literate. He was an academic genius. And my rich dad said, if you want to be rich, you have to be financially literate. And that's where that statement comes from. So my rich dad said an asset is very simply something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money from your pocket. So my poor dad, you saw, would say, son, our house is our biggest asset, and it's our biggest investment. My rich dad would say, see, he may be real smart, but he can't tell the difference between an asset and a liability. So what's really happening to the middle class is they're buying liabilities that their banker allows them to call assets. And that's what really gets in the way there. And the same with the poor, they have nothing but expenses, and that's why they never get ahead. My rich dad was able to either build, buy, or acquire assets, and that's what made him rich. So that's where that whole statement came from.
Okay, 808-5600, 808-5600 is the phone number. We're going to open this up to questions, but all of the lights just went dead on the board. Why did that happen? Okay, but all of the lights just went off on the board. I was wondering why, and then they came magically back up. Okay, line number 4, Andy from Hayward, you're on KSFO. Hi.
Hi, Mr. Kiyosaki. How you doing? I read your book, and I think it's changed my life. I understand the difference between an asset and a liability now. And I'm trying to acquire assets, and I was wondering if you could tell me, what I can do in the real estate in the Bay Area now to improve my assets.
And Robert, you were in the Bay Area not too terribly long ago. You see what's going on here in the real estate market, and this is a question that comes up all the time. Okay, is there anything underpriced out there?
Well, there always is a bargain, especially in real estate, very simply because it's a very inefficient market, where the stock market's just for the large caps is quite an efficient market. So real estate is what I think what most people fail to realize is every so often a piece of real estate will not move, and the person will get desperate and want to sell it. And because the real estate market is inefficient, like a very simple example is somebody who leaves their house, let's say the house is only worth $300,000, but they mark it up to $500,000. So it sits there for like 6 months, and then all of a sudden people stop buying it. So that's an example of an inefficient market. But more important than that is the thing about real estate. Real estate is fundamentally a cyclical investment. In other words, it goes up and then it comes down again. And the cycle may take anywhere from 9 to 12 years. So what happens to people is, about 5 years ago, you should have been buying everything you could get your hands on. And then the thing went back up again. So that's what real estate is. It's cyclical.
Now, this sounds like a contradiction to people who haven't read your book, because here we said that we're telling, the middle-class people out there saying, go and buy a house, and that's a liability. Would you please explain to people how real estate becomes an asset and not a liability?
That's a very good point. So to go back again, as we talked about before, investing is really a plan. And I learned the plan for real estate by playing the board game Monopoly. And it was a very simple plan of buying 4 greenhouses, and then you do a 1031 exchange into a red house. And very simply, that was it. So back in 1989, which is 10 years ago, I was buying as much real estate as I could because the Resolution Trust Corporation, you had the earthquake in San Francisco. All these things hit simultaneously because it's cyclical. And at that time, I started buying everything I could. And then as the market moved up, I was selling and then parlaying into a bigger real estate deal. So it is a matter of timing more than anything else.
Now, were these homes you lived in?
Oh, no.
No. That's another point. These were homes you rented.
That's correct. They had to go positive and make a positive cash flow. It's the same thing that Warren Buffett does, because Warren Buffett is a value investor. Mm-hmm. And so if a house is worth $100,000, he won't touch it unless he gave it for $60,000. But the thing with the stock, if it's worth $1,000 per share, he won't touch it unless he can get it for $600 a share. Okay,
but let's say you have someone like Andy. He's read the book. He's saying, okay, now what? Let's just pretend I don't know anything about Andy. Let's say he's renting. Here's another question you get all the time. I'm renting. I'm paying rent. I have nothing to show for it at the end of 2, 3, 5, 10 years. Isn't it better to buy a house than to rent? What would you say?
Well, it depends upon the market cycle and where you're at that time. Right now, if I was in San Francisco, I'd be renting. Just because I perceive a mania on it. Just like in the stock market, people are buying like crazy. And it's like the weather. If you wait long enough, it will change. So it is a matter of timing. The thing I always recommend is in the times when you're not buying, start getting educated. For example, when my wife and I we were broke back in 85, my wife and I.
Broke?
Yeah, absolutely flat broke. And so what we did during that time is I started studying, because I didn't have any money, there was no real assets around to buy because there was a mania on just prior to the 87 crash. So instead of trying to panic and jump in the frenzy, in the fear of being left behind, I just used that time, those 2 years, to study more, and I honed up on my real estate skills. So there was an 86 Tax Reform Act that really happened, and that changed the whole complexion, which led to the stock market crash in October of 87, which led to the savings and loan disaster, which led to the resolution trust.
Okay. 808-5600. Sorry, I think we lost Robert. We're going to change phones. 808-5600. 808-5600 is the phone number. And we're going to check in with Michael Bennett and then continue some of his Cynthia Oti and Robert Kiyosaki.
Cynthia and Robert, how are you?
Hi.
Wanted to inquire about what would be the best way to set up an REIT.
A real estate investment trust.
I have to be quite honest with you, that is beyond my scope. My message, as Cynthia knows, is very, very simple.
And that's why I love them.
Yeah, I'm really being very, very serious. When my rich dad very simply sat me down and played Monopoly with me. And he was showing me investing as a plan. It's not the product. It's not real estate. It's not stocks. It's not bonds. You really have to have a plan. So I set out a plan years ago just to buy 4 greenhouses when the market was down, when the market moved, I 1031 them tax-free into apartment buildings. And I just kept doing this plan boringly over and over and over again until I never had to work again.
Now, you said you were broke in 1985. Where did you get your money for that first down payment?
Well, that's going into my next book, okay?
Well, I want to know, inquiring minds, Robert. You can tell me we're friends.
Can I tell you something that is in the next book, per se?
Yeah, sure.
The biggest difference is that if you're an employee, it's really hard to get extra money. The tax laws are written against you. In 1943, they passed the act that basically, the idea of pay yourself first. What happened was the government got paid first after 1943. Ever since the year 1215 and the Magna Carta, the rich have written the rules. So the way you get the money to invest is by not being an employee, but is by being a guy like Bill Gates or Michael Dell, somebody who starts their own business. The tax laws are written in favor of people who are business owners.
But even when you start your own business, you need capital, you need seed money, you need to start somewhere. And my question is, how do people start? How do you get that seed capital?
That's what, Cynthia, if I go back one more step and make it even simpler, because that's my job. If I make it hard, it gets worse, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I found out the difference between my rich dad and my poor dad was their vocabulary. And what I say to people now is that what makes you rich is your literacy of financial vocabulary. My poor dad had the vocabulary of a school teacher. My rich dad had the vocabulary of an investor and a business owner. The most powerful tools we have are words, and words are free. The English language has approximately 2 million words in it. The average human being has command of 5,000 words. If you want to get rich, you really first need to start changing your vocabulary, because that is the power of words inside your brain that gives you the power.
So, for example?
Okay, well, when I speak to, there's just a difference in an asset and a liability.
Right.
If people are calling liabilities assets, they really get in trouble.
That's right. A car is not an asset, it's a liability. The house you live in is a liability, it's not an asset.
If the cash flow is going out the expense column.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really an educator. So today when I finance something, I use equity financing. In other words, I write a prospectus, and people invest with me, so it's other people's money.
Right, but that's not...
I understand, so, right. But it came from practicing using 4 greenhouses until I got my skills up, that people began to trust me that I could invest their money for them. That really is, I hate to be... Like, you look at Michael Dell. He started his business part-time while he was in college. You look at the guys who started Amazon.com. It started in their garage. I started my first business on my kitchen table.
On your kitchen table, and your first business was?
The one that most people know, the nylon and Velcro surfer.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I started that business in 1977 while I was a sales rep for Xerox running around. And I showed people my product. I wrote my business plan and all this, and I raised about $400,000, and I was off to the racetrack.
Now, wait a minute. Off to the racetrack, 77, you started the business. You said 85 you were broke. What happened?
Well, that's called lack of experience.
Okay, well, tell us what happened so we can benefit from this experience.
That's my third book. I mean,